Hi, I'm John DeDakis. I'm a novelist, a manuscript editor, a writing coach, and a former editor on CNN's The Situation Room with Wolf Blitzer. You're one-to-one with me, and I'm one-to-one with crime thriller author, Laurie Buchanan. Hi, Laurie. Welcome to One-to-One.
Hi, thanks, John, for having me.
This is going to be a fun conversation because you're a dynamo, is what you are. And in fact, here's the contradiction. You describe yourself as a type A Buddhist. How do you reconcile those two things?
I know. I'm very sweet, loving, kind, and thoughtful until I'm not, until I'm killing people behind the scenes. I'm very type A. I'm very structured. I'm very rigid, not with other people. This is with myself. It's something
Mhm.
I apply to myself. I'm easygoing with other people, except for my son would say that's not true. But but I am, but not to myself, and that's how I get the work done.
Okay. So you have just come out with it isn't out yet, but your fourth Sean McPherson novel, Iniquity, is coming out in April of 2024. Tell us a little bit about that.
So, iniquity takes place mostly on Mount Baker, which is just outside of Bellingham in Seattle. And we have Sean McPherson, his pregnant wife is kidnapped along with one of his best friends who's a homicide detective, Joe Bingham, his two daughters. So Emma and the two daughters are kidnapped with a few other women. So there's a total of 12 women who are going to be sold to a man in Russia. And it's going to be easy for these guys to do this because they put them on a cargo ship and just go across the Bering Strait. So we've got Russia that's what 35 or 53. It's not very far from the United States, and
Mhm.
it's doable, and it is done. And so the clock is ticking. They've got to do this without letting anybody get killed. They don't mind if the bad guys get killed, but without these women. They're holding these women and two young girls hostage, and they're selling them as sex slaves, but some of them are being sold for their organs.
Mm.
So it is very time intensive, the clock is ticking type thing. And Mount Baker, of course, is just a phenomenal place to work with as a location.
And the interesting thing also is that the backdrop for all of this in the Pacific Northwest, where you live, is Pines and Quill, which is a writing retreat. So it's very meta. You're writing a book about at a writer's retreat.
Yes, yes. And that Pines and Quill is actually based on, it is fictional, but it is based on my real life experience when I was a writer in residence at Hedgebrook on Whidbey Island off the coast of Seattle. And so there were little cottages, actually cabins. I have cottages at Pines and Quill. They have cabins, and they were each surrounded by a wooded area. And it was a little bit nerve wracking at night to be, surrounded in the dark by trees. And then we would walk from our little places, cabins, to a main place to have dinner, and we would talk about our day. I felt really good about this, or oh my gosh, I didn't get but two words written, or whatever. So it
Mhm.
was very much modeled after Pines and Quill is modeled after my experience at Hedgebrook.
Now, the other interesting thing is that there's an I thing going on. There's iniquity, and all of your novels start with the letter I. Talk about that concept.
Okay, so the first book, Indelible, the second book, Iconoclast, the third book, Impervious, and the fourth book, Iniquity. And you might notice that not only are they I words, but they're 4 syllables long. So I wanted to have something, the first novel, indelible, just to say the word, it tastes good. It feels good to say the word indelible. And I wanted to, like Sue Grafton, it was A for this, B for this, C for this. I wanted to have some kind of a signature. So something easy. Oh, she's the I lady. That's easy to remember. And
Right.
it's for each word is something that I only use the word once in the book. So it's fun for people to look for that word. Oh, there it is. And I write the entire 80,000 words around that concept, whatever that might be, iniquity. And in this case, iniquity is the sins of the father. The bad guy Gambino, Giorgio the Bull Gambino, is having them pay for the sins of the father. And so it's iniquity, and it's fun for me to be able to do that. It takes some thinking, and you've got to be able to have 300 pages, 80,000 words, and I can do it. It just takes some serious thinking, and then I have to leave because it's a series. I started with a 1-book contract. It went to 3, it went to 5, it went to 7, it went to 8, and now it's at 9.
Oh my
So I
goodness.
yeah,
Congratulations.
thank you. I've got to be able to drop little breadcrumbs and think far enough ahead so I can pivot and use things. So it's fun. I don't sleep well at night because I'm churning. It's just constant churning. And I'll reach for my phone and I'll put on the little memo thing and say, don't forget this. You remember that. Oh, this is great. That kind of a thing.
Does that help? Does that really help a lot?
Oh, yes.
Is it a short-term kind of thing where you speak it and the next day you apply it?
Yes. Very much. Very, very short term. I don't write like ahead and then go back and edit. I nail one chapter. It is nailed to the wall. Then I put that over here in the manuscript. Then I nail the next chapter. I add it to the end of that. Everything is absolutely nailed to the wall. I would not be able to. I need it clean and tidy as I go.
Talk about how you came up with this idea in the first place. How far back does it go? How did you get the idea? And talk about the road to getting published.
So the idea sparked when I was at Hedgebrook, although I was there writing nonfiction. My first 2 books were nonfiction. Um, but I saw this man in the distance, and he was some kind of a groundskeeper because he was pushing a wheelbarrow. He was extraordinarily handsome, but he had a significant limp. And that just went in my mind. It went into a Pendaflex folder somewhere in my brain. And when I decided to make the switch from nonfiction to fiction, that is where Sean McPherson came to life. He started out 5 years ago. He was a policeman. His partner was killed. This traumatic thing happened. He had to go to his sister and brother-in-law's writing retreat to recover. And he was the groundskeeper there for a while. Then he went back, rather than going back to the police department because he was put on permanent leave because of this limp. He has become a private investigator, and his best friends are 2 gentlemen. One is a homicide detective and the other is an FBI special agent. And they often work together to solve whatever's going on. It might be something Mick is working on that he's been hired to do, or Joe Bingham or Rafferty. And it just has blossomed, and now they have wives, and it's growing like I never imagined.
Now, you're obviously in a rhythm with these things, but it couldn't have been easy the first time. Uh,
No.
Talk about the obstacles that you feel that you had to overcome in order to get that first book nailed down so that then you could have the trajectory that you've
Yes.
got now.
So, having come from nonfiction, which in my world, and it could be different for anybody else, is much easier because you're dealing with facts. You just
And
need
what
to
was
make
not
them.
and what was the nonfiction background for you?
The nonfiction is Note to Self, a 7-step path to gratitude and growth, and the business of being soul purpose in and out of the workplace, based on my years of being a holistic health practitioner. That's what I did in the real world. And so I wrote those 2 books based on my experiences, and I did a lot of teaching when I was a holistic health practitioner. I had huge classes quite often, and then people would say, "Oh, you need to write a book." So when you're dealing with facts, it's easy because you've got facts, and you just have to bring them in and make them very palatable and creative and deliver them in a very appetizing way. When you are writing fiction, you've got to make the whole thing up. You create your world. So Pines and Quill is really it's fictitious, but it's in Bellingham, which is real. It's just north of Seattle. It's but you're making people up. And so I'm I had come from a more clinical background, and I needed to be more creative, more, you had to switch from one side of your brain to the other. And that was hard for me
Why was it hard?
because I'm exacting. I'm rigid. I want it just exactly so. And fiction isn't necessarily that,
Right.
not necessarily that at all. And you've got to be able to pull people in with gusto and buy into a world that doesn't exist. It's
Right.
easy to do that with nonfiction because it's something they can look up and they can research and go, yeah, she knows what she's talking about. This, you've got to pull them in hook, line, and sinker and keep them now for 9 books, not just one, not just 2, not just 3, not just 9 books. And I have to get one out every spring. So there's a lot.
Isn't that like working with a gun at your head?
It kind of is. It's
You seem to like working with a
I
gun at your head.
it's fun. It is hard. It make no mistake. At least for me it is. I'm sure that for other writers it's easy peasy. I know so many come out with 2 and 3 books a year. I have no idea how they do that.
Right.
None. But this is extraordinarily difficult, but it's kind of like a game. Can I make that hurdle? Will I skim the bar? Will I surpass the bar? And I kind of like holding my toes to the fire.
Okay, so you talked a little bit about your process. I get the impression that you're a seat of the pantser?
I am. I do not. I so admire people who just have these, they have these vision boards and they have the whole thing practically written out. Nope. Everything I write, tomorrow morning will have come out of my head tonight when I'm sleeping.
But that doesn't necessarily mean that what you write tomorrow will survive in the rewrite, correct?
Exactly. That is
Wha
absolutely correct.
So what happens in the rewrite that, what are the things that you need to fix in the rewrite that you don't do as a seat of the pantser?
So it's usually pulling in the emotion. So I'm very clinical, and I have a writing coach, Christine Desmet, who's phenomenal, and she'll
Yes,
read
she
it
is.
and she'll say, okay, that's flat. What does he have to lose? How does he feel about that? I want to know that. What does she have to lose? How does she feel about that? And then I'll say, oh, okay, thank you. And then blah, 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 blah. Now that the question's been asked, then I just write it. But I come out pretty black and white at the get-go, and then from there, color is added.
Okay, and that kind of raises the question about taking criticism because that hurts. It stings. I mean, you come away from a smoking keyboard and you go, "Man, that rocked." And then someone goes, "Well, not so much." How do
So
you handle that?
actually, so I pay a nice fee for criticism, and it's not criticism, it's feedback. She never criticizes my work. She Christine is feedback. And I know we've been doing this for over a decade. I know that she's doing this for my best, my highest and best good, so that my writing is the best, so that I win the awards, and I do win the awards, so that I get invited to do whatever. So I know that she is doing it out of I want I want to be able to hold her up as a client, first of all. So other people will say, oh, if she coached Laurie to that, I want in on that action. And and she's doing it because she loves the work. She loves the work too. And then, when I turn it back into her, she'll go, yes, I knew you had it in you all along. Yes, This is what I was talking about, Laurie. So she doesn't write the book at all. She'll just ask the questions that I failed to ask. How do they feel? What do they have to lose? Those are some typical things, because I just get right into it, and then it leaves. And then she'll say, "Yep, but what about this? But what
Well,
about?"
this is helping me understand some connections because Lori and I, or I'm sorry, Christine and I were in journalism school together at the University of Wisconsin in Madison, and she ran the Wisconsin Writers Institute and Right on the Lake. And is that where you met her? Because that's where I met you. It's got to be at
Yes,
least 10
yes,
years
and
ago or more.
yes, more. And I had been living at the time in Crystal Lake. My husband and I lived there for 20 something years, and that's where I had my practice. Whole Essence was in Crystal Lake, Illinois. And so, and before that, I was in the corporate world, and that was in Lincolnshire, Illinois. So I've worn some hats, but yes, I had gone there for the first book, Note to Self, A 7-Step Path to Gratitude and Growth. And I hired her there, and I fell in love with her. I absolutely adore her style. I adore how she shoots from the hip. You look at her and you think, "Oh, she's so sweet, loving, kind, and thoughtful," until she's not.
Well,
Until
that's the
she's
journalism. That's the
yeah,
journalism
yeah.
background.
But that's why we stay together, is because I need to know the truth. I wouldn't hire a friend because the friend will say, "Oh yeah, it's great." I need somebody who's going to tell me the honest truth. And she tells me the honest truth. And then I do the best I can to live up to her questions and answer those questions. Because she'll go in and say, "As a reader, I want to know this. As a reader, that's not viable. Nope, you're not going to get away with that. I can't, that's
Wow.
not, nope, 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 nope." So, and that's what I need to hear.
You're also very disciplined and what I would call a marketing maven. And I think a lot of people, a lot of writers, at least the ones I work with, are surprised when they discover they need to do the marketing, even if they got a book deal with Random House. Gone are the days when they're going to pay for your cross country book tour, unless you're
Right,
John Grisham and you don't need it.
right.
So did you always know that you were going to have to be doing the marketing? And how do you mentally approach that part of the process?
So I get up at 4 o'clock every morning. I don't even need an alarm. I just wake up, and the first I get my yoga out of the way. I've got my coffee, but the first thing that happens after that is social media. I get out there. You should only have 10% touting yourself. Mine is just under 14%. It's almost 14%. So I do 3 posts a day on the platforms. I recently left.
Which platforms are you on?
I left X because of the anti-Semitism. Couldn't take that, so I lost 12,000 followers there. That's okay. I'd rather have
Hmm.
my integrity.
Wow.
So I have Facebook, Instagram, and Threads. And they all work together because they're all Meta products. So I post 3 times a day, and I promote other people. I put out a daily walking my muse. I walk 6 miles a day. I walk
Wow.
3 2-mile chunks each day with my big dog, my not so standard poodle Henry, and we go walking. And that's when I'm writing, and I need to clear the cobwebs, and that's part of what happens. So I get up at 4 and I do my thing, and then I do social media, and then it's still dark. So I put a headlamp on. Henry's got a light on too, and we go marching around. I live very close to the river. We walk along the river. I carry pepper spray, not for people. We have cougar, we have bear, we have so on and
Whoa.
so forth. So
This
I've
is
got
in
that.
Boise. This is Boise, Idaho, right?
Yes, this is
Okay.
Boise, Idaho. And so I get my 2 miles, 2 miles, and 2 miles in, and the rest of it is writing, 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 writing.
So when you say you're writing, is there a set time?
When I get back from my first walk. So I prime the pump with that first 2-mile walk, and I sit down, and typically I will light a tea light. I usually use Yankee. I usually use Macintosh apple because it smells so good no matter what time of year. And I let that burn. It's usually a 6-hour burn, and that's when I stop. But I still get one more walk in. So remember, I walk 2 miles, and I walk about a 16, 17-minute mile. So I'm back pretty fast. So it's still burning,
I
and then
would be running if I were watching you.
well, I'm pretty tall. I'm 5'8", and I've got long legs, and I've got Henry, and we are moving. And so, I get back and I sit back down and I continue to write until that candle goes out of its own volition. I can't help it. There's none
Yeah,
of
but
that.
what happens if your own creativity expires way before the candle does?
If that happens, and it has, it doesn't happen very often. I always have, when I end the writing day, I have a document that I go in, and I call it "and then what?" So I have to have some kind of a "and then what?" Don't forget this, and then what? I need to wrap these things up. I can't end a book and, well, what about the woman who was decapitated, or what about I have to be able to wrap things up. So, and then what? So if there's any and then what's in the chapter that I was working on, I capture those, I gather those. But typically, if I'm just if I hit my head on the table and I can't do it anymore, I'll go out and create some graphics, some memes, some whatever. I'll do something that will save me time the next day.
What kind of advice do you have for the wannabe writer, the person who really has an idea that's been nagging them for a while, but they just don't know where to start?
This is the easiest piece of advice to say. It's harder to do. When you hear it, you're going to say, "Oh, it's so easy, but that's for me." Show up. Show up. That's what I say. And then when you do show up, be concise.
What do you mean concise?
So instead of rambling because you want to hit a certain word count, you're going to have to cut that out anyway. Just get to the heart of the matter. The barn was red, not da 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 da.
The atmospherics, yeah.
Yeah. So get to the point, get right to the point. And because that's what readers want. We now have people who are listening or reading, and they're used to these quick sound bites. They want, okay, then what? Then what? Then what? They don't want da, 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 da.
Right, right, okay. And I would imagine that your style has evolved, or has it?
Um, I don't know that I would say it has. I think the stories are more and more interesting because I've done more and more research. Now I've gotten to go to the morgue. I've gotten to talk with the Emmy. I've gotten to talk with the SWAT team. I've gotten to go on ride-alongs. I have a Ruger GP100. I shoot it. I know about. I need to be able to to write accurately. People will know in a nanosecond if you're making stuff up. And I need to be dead on accurate. So I would say, because I've gotten to have these experiences, and most of them are delivered through the Idaho Writers Guild, make these things possible. Um, then I can write. I have more confidence that I can write about, what happens when a bullet enters here and exits here. Maybe different than what the normal person who's not involved in violence might think. What happens if between a person who hangs themselves, or a person who is hung? What is the difference? How can you know this? So you can write with much more confidence, which I think elevates the stories.
My goodness. I mean, do you do a lot of teaching about writing? I mean, your whole career before that was holistic, but is writing something that you teach as well?
No, I write about the
Well,
business
why
side
not?
of I write about the business aspect of being a writer. You were just in Edmonds with me at Write on the Sound, and I presented Authorpreneur. I'm presenting it in January to Sisters in Crime Idaho, and that's through an Eventbrite opportunity. Um, that kind of thing. I feel really confident about the business aspect. My second book, The Business of Being, is it's a phenomenal business manual. And just because you're a good writer doesn't mean you're good at business. But if you're a writer, you better be good at the business side of it. You better, or you'll sink. You won't float. You will not float. So you need. I feel really comfortable about sharing with others the business, the behind the scenes business, and even somewhat of the marketing. I couldn't say, oh yeah, this is how I recommend that you spend this much money on Facebook and this. That's not my expertise, but the
Mhm.
actual business.
Okay. Um, so I was going to ask you what are you working on next, but you've got, a couple of books in the hopper already. So
Yeah.
so I mean, you already know where things are going, right?
Right. So the next one that after Iniquity comes out in April. The next one, which is currently with my publisher right now, is Illusionist. And I had a blast writing that. So when I was a kid, I wanted to be a magician so bad, and a mad scientist and an international spy. I was desperate, and I would talk to God at night, and I would say, you're God. You could just have this happen, and nobody would need to know. Nobody would need to know that my maiden name is Hunter, that Laurie Hunter is now, whoever. You could just whippity doo dah it and make it work. God never bought any of that. But
Yeah.
in this book, Illusionist, there is a magician, and I got to do magic tricks in the book that were stunning. They are absolutely stunning. I think I blew Christine out of the water sometimes, and it was fun for me to be able to do these magic tricks, really cutting edge, bleeding edge magic tricks
Oh
in the
my.
book. And they had to pull off a murder where nobody got killed, but it had to be absolutely believable. Somebody had to die, and it had to be witnessed, and
Right. And if I remember correctly, you have the first chapter or the very beginning of it at the end of Iniquity, right?
yeah, so every book has the prologue for the next book in it. Not every time, but I'm leaning more toward it. In the prologue, I use the I letter. Sometimes I can't justify using it till a couple of chapters in. I can't always have it in the prologue, but I try. Um, and then in each book, also, I use only one time. It's no more than a couple of paragraphs. I use a great horned owl, and I'm up in the great horned owl is the POV, the point of view, is from the great horned owl's perspective,
Ooh.
seeing somebody lurking through, between the pine trees at night, going from this, and I only do that once in each book, and that's one of my little hooks, is to do that. And I'm desperate to write a book called Indigenous, which would be the I and the four syllables. But I thought, no matter how much research I do, I wouldn't have the right to do that. Somebody who is actually Native American, they need to do that. But I would absolutely. But one of them will be Iditarod, and
Well,
I
yeah,
will go
okay,
there.
but you could also do indigenous, but not from the point of view of an indigenous person.
I could do that. I could do that, and I would really. I would not want to step on anyone's toes. I have readers who look very specifically, because I always have a person either in a wheelchair, or they're blind, or they're deaf. I always have something like that. One of the guests is always uh,
Mhm.
has a disability, and I always want to make sure that I never talk down, that it is delivered in a very respectful and very accurate way.
So people can get in touch with you through your website,
Yes.
lauriebuchanan.com, and that is where you'll be able to find, well, there's a gallery of pictures, there's thumbnails of all the other books and links to how you can get them. Anything else that you want to bring up that I haven't gone to?
Just that all of the books by Christmas, the 3rd book that will be on audiobook too. So I'm very excited that they're all going to audiobook. And then when Iniquity comes out in April, the audiobook will come out simultaneously with the paperback and with the ebook. So I'm very excited. And Rebecca Stern, she is the narrator. Oh my gosh. Just if the reader's interested, just go out to anywhere where you would buy an audiobook and you get that sample, like 5-minute sample. Just listen to her voice. Oh my gosh. She's
Wow.
amazing.
Okay, I'm John DeDakis. You've been one to one with me, and I've been one to one with crime thriller author Laurie Buchanan. Laurie, thank you. This has been delightful.
Thank you for having me. I so appreciate it. I had fun.